And welcome. Welcome. Having a little bit of internet issues this morning. So, hoping that this sticks and I don't get kicked off. Ah, all right. It is July 25th, 2023. Venus is officially stationed retrograde at 28 degrees of Leo. Chiron is also stationed retrograde in Aries. And the sun has joined Venus and Mercury in its home sign of Leo. Happy birthday to the Leos. Welcoming the sun's illuminating, revitalizing energy into your Leo house. There's a lot happening there with Venus retrograde. We've been talking about it. Mercury's also there in Leo this week, finishing out its time in Leo. It has a conversation with Venus this week in Leo. And it reactivates the Yod energy with Neptune and Pluto this week before it transitions into Virgo, where it stays for a very long time because it's going to retrograde there. So Mercury's busy doing things this week, and we'll talk about that. But otherwise, astrologically, it's a pretty quiet week, which is appreciated because last week was not super calm. There was a lot happening astrologically last week. I know a lot for me personally, and I know many of you are moving through a lot as well. And there's still, although it's an astrologically quiet week, this week leaves space for us to deal with whatever came up last week or whatever is coming up under this Pluto square to the nodes. So, that Pluto square to the nodes I talked a lot about last week at the beginning of the Mars Day. And it's important to remember that these things are like indicating super, super deep and karmic change and transformation and healing and wounding, right? Both sides of the spectrums when we talk about Pluto. And also, the nodal axis. And when I talk about the nodal axis, I'm talking about the moon's nodes, and those are points in the sky. So these aren't celestial bodies. This is math. And so the nodes are the place where the moon's orbit around the Earth crosses the Earth's orbit around the sun. So it's the point in the chart where the moon's orbit crosses the sun's orbit. Those are the moon nodes. And so the nodes are known to be karmic because it's like they piece together all of the different parts of existence and consciousness. And so where the north node is where we're feeding, where we're heading, where there's hunger, where we're learning. And where the south node is where we're releasing, where we're coming from, right? The lines of lineage that pull us through times and past lives and et cetera. And so when Pluto, the planet of transformation and deep change, along with power, and when I say power, I mean like the structures of power, not the individual with power. This is big ideas. Pluto is the furthest out of all of the planets that we as astrologers look to. There's other asteroids and planetary bodies, but Pluto's the furthest out, meaning it's holding, right, the depths of everything that we don't know. And so when Pluto is in a square to the nodal axis, we're learning where things are deeper than maybe we understood they were, or where things are more painful than maybe we thought they were. This is why Pluto is tied to shadow work. And so as we're moving through this time with Pluto square to the nodes, which is going to last, it started a couple weeks ago. There's 3 exact hits of it. We already had the first hit, and then we have the next 2 exact hits of that Pluto square to the nodes at 29 degrees. And then the last one is at 28 degrees of cardinal signs. And so the last 2 of those exact hits happened this week. That's some of the main astrology that's getting missed by people who don't follow the nodes or even follow Pluto, because this is really undercurrent, like deep, shadowy work that's available this week with these 2 hits to the nodes. But then we're going to be feeling it. We're still going to feel it for probably a month after this pretty solidly, because the nodes and Pluto are moving backwards. They're both in retrograde motion. The nodes always move retrograde. Well, they do this wobble. But generally speaking, they move retrograde through the system. And Pluto is currently retrograde. So they're moving at similar paces right now. So that square that's happening, and again, this is 29 degrees of cardinal signs. Specifically, we have Pluto in Capricorn, we have the North Node at 29 Aries, and we have the South Node at 29 Libra. And so if that's touching places in your chart, you might be feeling this more significantly. But we're also seeing it happen in the world around us. This is the stuff that's going on throughout the whole world around power and greed specifically. And so in our own lives, it's considering where we have given up power to other people, where we can stand in our power, where we are using our power and harming others with it. All of those themes are coming up, but there's also a really big opportunity to work with healing any kind of intergenerational stuff, any kind of deep patterning that you have felt throughout your whole life. This is a great time for shadow work. This is a really good time to go back to therapy. This is a really good time to go deeper into the workings of who you are, the pain that you feel, how you process pain. And it's all happening during this Venus retrograde. So there's things coming up around relationships and finances and self-worth and value and creativity and all the other things, all the other Venus Leo things. But my point is, even though it's an astrologically kind of quiet week in comparison to other weeks and even next week, we're still dealing, right, with all the stuff. It's not like what we were dealing with or what's been coming up just goes away, right? So the opportunity this week is that we're moving through the moon, our emotions, our internal world. We're moving through this first quarter phase, which is in between a new moon and a full moon. So things are growing. But at this time, and a first quarter moon is when the moon in transit is squaring where the sun is, right? And so that happens today, actually, on the 25th. But when we're at that square, it's kind of like a checkpoint in our process, right? So this week we may see things coming up that show us where we need to adjust a little bit, or where we're maybe not going to hit a certain goal or a certain thing that we wanted to happen, right? Something might come up to, show us where we need to pivot a little bit, right? So we're in between this internal process of whatever, right, was beginning or shifting around the Cancer new moon. But as we're at this next phase, we're coming into this first quarter and the light is growing, which means our awareness and our consciousness is growing. So we're able to see things, we're able to recognize where we are in the process, maybe where we need to go, shift, a step that we need to change or redo. Can all be part of what's happening in the cosmos this week. So, depending on if you work specifically with the moon, you might have a greater idea of what this process is for you. If not, then you can just keep in mind that throughout this week, recognize where limitations, blockages, new awarenesses are coming up around, and especially in your emotional experience. So like, where are you feeling additionally triggered, right? Where are things feeling a little more achy or sad? Like recognizing, like listening to the body, right? Because the whole thing about this Venus retrograde is it's in Leo, and that's Leo's the heart, right? And so this Venus retrograde is very much about coming into our heart center and checking in to listen to what our emotional needs are. And so with this first quarter moon phase that we're coming through this week, as we build to the full moon, there are places where we can recognize what's happening, right? Because what happens in the full moon is it's this big peak moment, right? So I think about the first quarter moon as the time where, you know, the new moon, you buy a soda at the store, right? So say you buy a soda at the store on the new moon. And then from the new moon to the first quarter moon, which is this week, you're just kind of like walking with it. You have it in your hand, no big deal. You can open it, whatever. But when it gets to the first quarter moon phase, where you go from the first quarter to the full moon, which is the week that we're coming into, it's like you're taking that soda can or that soda bottle and you're just shaking it, right? And you're shaking it. And if you don't open it up to let a little off the top, if you don't recognize that you're shaking it so that you can breathe, right? Then you get to the full moon and you open it and it explodes. And you're like, shit, why did that explode? Well, I don't know, because you've been, shaking it and you haven't taken time to recognize. So that's one of the ways that I think about this moon phase that we're coming into is pay attention to when you're shaking, right? And breathe. Take a moment when you're feeling yourself feel emotions, right? And if you can't feel them right in that moment, put a pin in it, but be sure that you're coming back to it so that you can recognize what's coming up. So when we get to the full moon, you have a little bit of awareness of what your body's been moving through, what your mind has been reeling about, right? So that it's just that, that little bit of additional self-awareness of the internal moony stuff. So I hope that was helpful. And yeah, so the other thing that happens this week is there's a lot more of those quincunxes, right? So we have still Pluto and Neptune in quincunx formation with Venus, which is stationing. But Mercury is also moving through that same part of the chart. So it's also hitting those quincunx, and the sun is going to quincunx Saturn this week as well. So again, not a lot of like heavy astrological stuff like normal, but these quincunxes and this moon phase that we're in just make it feel a little bit uncomfortable. It makes us recognize that we need to adjust, that there are things that we need to change, but it doesn't feel easy, right? It doesn't feel comfortable. Like it's hard to hold. And there's also moments through this week where there's that awareness that like, this is hard to hold, or this is going to take longer for me to heal or for me to move through, or this is deeper than what I realized that it was. And so I feel like that is going to be a theme for the week. Okay. Pausing my stream of thoughts to check my notes and make space for anyone that has questions, comments. Last week was Zealot, astrologically. Sorry, my phone, I didn't charge my laptop, so now I have to have it here and charge it here. So last week, astrologically, just to bring us back into what maybe was coming up last week, we had a lot. So we had the Cancer new moon and the nodal axis changed to Aries and Libra and made that exact square to Pluto for the first time, which finishes this week with two more of those exact squares. We also had Mercury squaring Jupiter. This was loud, maybe saying too much, getting into, arguments or frustrations. We had Mars opposite Saturn, right? So we were feeling that all week. And then Mercury moves into Virgo on Friday, this coming Friday, and we'll start to pick up on that same opposition to Saturn. So considering anywhere that your activity, your body, your movement, your plans, your goals were limited, where are there obstacles, any of that Mars Saturn stuff that happened for you last week, Mercury is going to come back in and kind of re-agitate that point. And what's happening, and we talked about this a little bit in the Mars Day last week, is Saturn is the stronger planet in this opposition because it moves slower and it's at a slower point in its cycle, and it's retrograde. So there's a lot of energy right now with Saturn in comparison to Mars, which is just doing its regular cycle through the zodiac sign of Virgo, which it doesn't have a ton of rulership in. So Saturn is the one that's going to win this Saturn-Mars opposition in the sky. And so as we're dealing with Saturn-Mars things, Saturn wants us to be building long-term. Mars wants us to do something right now. And so where the right now actions are being limited, or there's obstacles, or it's hard to have the get up and go to do it right now, that's Saturn saying, because you don't need the right now fix, you need a longer term fix. So what does that look like? And so again, Mercury is going to come in and do this same dance with Saturn, but Mercury is going to be in its home sign of Virgo. This allows us to mentally discern, make plans, take actual physical, tangible, reality, logic-based steps, right? But remembering that before that, this week, Mercury is moving through the last part of Leo, coming into a conversation with Venus. So before it moves into Virgo, its home, it's going to pick up a message, right? Mercury is the messenger. And so it's going to pick up a message or guidance or awareness from Venus, which just stationed retrograde in Leo. It's going to give us more awareness around what our values are in order for us to recognize what the long-term goal is and what the steps are that we can take to get there, the Saturn stuff, right? And so, but that was all triggered last week with the Saturn-Mars opposition that happened in the sky. And then we also had the sun at 29 degrees coming into an opposition with Pluto, which formed a grand cross in the sky with the two nodes, the North Node and the South Node at 29 degrees of Libra and Aries, and then Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn, and then the sun was at 29 degrees of Cancer. So again, really illuminating these really deep changes in the sun as it moves through Leo for the next month in its home, gets to integrate some of that consciousness that was pulled down within that grand cross. So over the next month, as the sun moves through Leo, its home sign, and it has this conversation with Venus that's going to be retrograde, it's allowing us to integrate more things into our consciousness, because we aren't who we once were. We'll never be that person again, right? And so the moon, or the sun moving through its home, the sun indicates our self, our human form, our consciousness, our awareness, our identity, our ego. And so as the sun moves through its home, we all get this kind of rebirth of those parts of our self, our identity, our consciousness. And as it comes into contact with Venus, we're getting to integrate who we are now and the values that we have now, how they have changed or shifted or grown, right? So it's a really beautiful month to come into who you are in new ways, to figure out what you value in new ways. And all of that's going to depend on where Leo is in your chart, what is being activated by the 29 degree grand cross in the sky, and more and more and more. Okay, so yeah, so all that happened. And then Venus station retrograde over the weekend, and then Chiron station retrograde over the weekend. And then we also had Mercury squaring Uranus. That was on Moon Day. That was yesterday. And that was a little uneasy to the nervous system, but maybe innovative, breakthrough, mental stuff also happening. Maybe just anxiety. Maybe for me, it was awareness of my anxiety. Man, the Saturn Mars opposition took me all the way out last week. I'm not surprised. It's very Saturn Mars. I got a huge migraine. I was so sick. I could do absolutely nothing. Um it was awful. It was awful. Um but it was very, Saturn Mars, I was scrambling to try and figure out, um it's there's so much happening in my world. There's so much happening in my world, and I was just kind of like scrambling, and I was not taking time to ground. I was not drinking enough water. I was not feeding my body the way that it deserves to be fed. And I wiped out completely. Um, and so it sucked, but also at the same time, it was a kind of jolting back to my human experience. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much time, so many times like on this journey where you get to a point, and even though, I mean, I am who I am and I do the work that I do, and I'm talking all the time about how like we can know something, but like to get the integration of it, like there's still these ripples of trauma and programming and all of these things. And so last week it really jolted me back into my human experience and back into recognizing where I was settling in the short term, or where I was settling my long-term goals in order to do these short-term things. Um, and that's not true to me in my experience. And like I'm very Saturnian, and so I very much honor the long process. Like I recognize that part of my journey is to be an old crone, and in order to be an old crone, it takes me my whole life, right? And so, um, like as a Saturn ruled being, Vera, that's enough. As a Saturn ruled being, um, I can recognize how long it's going to take me to feel the success and to hit my long-term goals. And but my programming keeps me doing that Mars thing of, well, figure it out now. What are you doing right now? Like, and so when I get caught up in that Marsy stuff, that's out of alignment for me. So this opposition for me was very much a time where Saturn was like, sit down, like sit down. You need a reset. Like go take a time out. And unfortunately that came via illness. And for me, that's just like I get a really bad migraine and my senses, I get very foggy, everything, like my whole body starts to tingle. It's not great. Um, but then things occur and I feel better. But that's because I have to literally stop and take care of myself, give myself water, take a bath, take a nap, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, even though telling this for a lot of reasons, but, like as the reminder too, like I know what's going on with the astrology, you know, like I knew what was going on last week with this Mars Saturn opposition, and I was seeing it play out in a lot of different places in my life. And yet still, um, it got me, you know. Chani Nicholas is one of the most popular astrologers, specifically queer astrologers. And it also got her. She traveled across country and she got sick and was isolated at home. or isolated away from her home. Um, so just because we know the astro weather doesn't mean that we're not in the storm with you. Um, so yeah, so there was a lot, but I also went to a fair last week. That was fun. I haven't been to a fair in definitely since COVID. But the years before then, I'm sure. Um, it was this small town fair in West Virginia. And it was comical and fun. So that was good. I got to see my best friend and her baby last week, and that was lovely. Um, yeah, so a lot happened for sure. And it was like the spectrum of like, there's all this good stuff happening, and then there's all of this not great stuff happening. Um, and it's just because so much is happening in the sky and all the different parts of the chart being touched in so many ways. So all that to say, there's a lot of shit going on. How are you? If you feel like chiming in to the chat or come off mic, or if you're watching on the replay, feel free to pop out and go into the comments. Let me know what you're moving through, what questions you have, and then we'll get into the week ahead astrology. I think my laptop's charged and I can move over to my regular spot. Okay, let me know. Okay. So the first thing, y'all seem to enjoy the move through of the week. So I'm going to try to remember to do that at the beginning, but you know how I am. But we're going to do it at the beginning of this one. So we're going to go through day by day just so you can see the different aspects that are playing out. So this day looks like a hodgepodge. This is today. There's a lot bubbling, a lot of things happening under the surface. And this is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So this is back to today, Tuesday, July 25th. We have the moon finishing out its time in Libra. This is pulling us into that first quarter moon phase that I talked about earlier today. As it transitions into Scorpio, it will hit a square to the sun, and that's what makes that first quarter moon. As the light is filling in the sky, as the moon moves away from the sun and it's able to reflect the light of the sun again in new ways. And then the other thing that happens on this day, it's moon stuff, right? So we have as the moon moves into Scorpio, it's also going to, so it's first going to square the sun, and then it's going to trine Saturn at 6 degrees. So this is a water trine. So this is about how we can build better systems for our emotions specifically, but also for our overall health. So we may be able to do something on this day, or maybe something comes into our awareness about the systems in which we take care of ourselves. Because when we talk about the moon, this new moon was new moon in Cancer. And so again, a lot about our emotional landscape and how we can nurture ourselves in better ways, take care of ourselves in better ways. And with that trine to Saturn, that gives us support to build more sustainable structures, things in your daily life. Did I forget to unmute myself again? Oh, no. Okay. All right. So things in the daily life that, can support your emotional needs, right? So today on the 25th, it would be a good day just to check in with that. And if you're not seeing this until the next day, then you can still check in with that, because that's one of the main things that's happening under this moon cycle. This Cancer new moon cycle is around checking in with our emotional health and well-being, and how to secure and make spaces that are safe for us to hold ourselves and not deny our own needs for emotion, and emotional connection and emotional safety. So the other thing that happens exact today for the second time is this square between Pluto and the nodes. And the reason that the Pluto nodal square is happening 3 times is because of the way that the moon nodes wobble. So when we talk about the moon nodes, I already mentioned that they're not points, they're mathematical points in the sky of where the moon's orbit and the sun's orbit cross. And so the orbits wobble as well. So when astrology was first being used, there wasn't a way to calculate the wobble. So there's what is referred to as the mean nodes. And then there's another thing that's called the true node. I use the true node because we have the ability now to account for the wobble. So we can see exactly how those moon nodes wobble on the chart and in the sky. And so I go by that. And so as the moon's nodes are wobbling, it's coming in and out of contact with things. And one of the ways that I think about that is remembering that the nodes are tied to this karmic evolutionary energy. And so at the wobble, the back and forth, is similar to a planet going retrograde, except it's consistently happening, right? It's this consistent adjustment of what we need to take from the past and what we need to let go of, what we need to take and what we need to let go of. And it's that back and forth integration that allows us to evolve in a healthy way, because we're consistently revisiting and coming back. And, and that's why patterns come back and forth into our life, right? Because our soul's evolution, it takes time to integrate the newness, because time here isn't really time. Time is made up, but I won't go into that whole thing here. But so I think of the moon's wobble as this important factor in the integration of how our soul's moving through. And I think that is a similar way that I look at planetary retrogrades as well. This important moment for us to, the planet's moving direct and we're learning, and we're taking in all of this information. And then it has to pause and go back so that we have time and space to integrate whatever it is. Right. And so Venus is doing that right now in the sky. Chiron's doing that right now in the sky. Saturn's doing that right now in the sky. Neptune is also retrograde. Pluto is also retrograde. A lot of planets retrograde. That means there's a lot of integration happening. Okay. But the reason for the 3 hits of Pluto and the nodes is because of that nodal wobble. So this is on this day, it's the second of those. And then the third one happens on the 28th. which is Friday, Venus's day. But it's so slight, like we're feeling it. We're feeling it. This is just the exaction. So we might see things coming out like out into the open collectively. But in our personal lives, we're feeling this consistently. It never gets further than a couple minutes away from each other. So we're feeling it all week. And some. Okay, but that's the main stuff on Tuesday. And then we get into Wednesday, the 26th, and this is Mercury's day. And on this day, Mercury is coming into 26, 27 degrees, and it's coming into this exact quincunx to Neptune, which is activating that yodel energy, right? And this is anytime we have Mercury and Neptune, it can be foggy and fuzzy kind of conversation and mental thoughts and processes. And when we have a quincunx, it's uncomfortable, it's uneasy, it doesn't flow or fit. It doesn't seem to fit. And Venus just did this, and it'll do this again in its retrograde 2 more times, this aspect to Neptune. But Mercury is here this time to speak to or bring some kind of intellectual understanding to what Venus is feeling uncomfortable about the uncomfortability of something. Mercury is able to speak to it or understand it in a new way on Wednesday. And I think that's a really sweet kind of activation point, because at that point, Mercury also is picking up on this conjunction to Venus. So not only is Mercury following up this aspect that Venus made last week, but also it's coming into a conversation with Venus. So we get really clear mentally on our values, and specifically where they're not lining up for us spiritually or romantically, or to our ideals, right? This could be an awareness of values versus ideals when we have this quincunx energy happening. But it can be uncomfortable, right? The other thing that we have pulling is, the nodal axis is still doing a lot. It's also in connection with Venus. It doesn't get exact until later, actually, when Venus comes back in its post shadow, and it'll connect. So this Venus lingering is like Venus pausing again, right? It's this pause to say I missed something, I got to go back and get something, or I got to integrate something, or I got to learn something, I got to go back and reevaluate, right? And it's doing that before it hits this North Node trine in fire, which when it eventually hits that point, early September, end of August, early September, it gives us this like launch of creativity in some new way. But until then, Venus and your creative stuff might feel halted. Or it might be the opposite. You might, during a Venus retrograde, you might be someone who gets very, very, very creative during a Venus retrograde. It's all going to depend on your chart and your experience. But just noticing that it's not going to hit this sextile to the North Node exactly until it goes all the way back to 12 degrees and then comes all the way back, to hit it in its post shadow phase. So you got time to kind of come into those energies. So if you aren't feeling able to connect to whatever creative outlet you normally work with, just recognizing that sometimes when Venus is retrograde, that's part of the retrograde, is that pulling back from the norm, whatever your norm is. Okay. So that's happening on Wednesday. And that's pretty much the main thing that happens on Wednesday, is that quincunx between Mercury and Neptune. And then on the 27th, we have the moon in Scorpio, and it's doing a lot of stuff. So the moon in Scorpio is doing a lot because it's at the end now. So it's going to be squaring the planets in Taurus. Well, it's going to be opposing the planets in Taurus, and then it's going to be squaring the planets in Leo. And trining Neptune at the end of Pisces, and sextiling Pluto at the end of Capricorn. So the moon is super busy on Jupiter's day on Thursday. And so we might have a lot of moods. We might have a lot of feelings that are coming up on Thursday. We might be moving through a lot. So again, just keeping in mind what's coming up. This is a Scorpio moon. So it might feel a little intense or overwhelming. As it moves into Sagittarius later in the day, in the evening, that energy kind of lightens up a little bit, and there can be a little bit of play and fun that's available. But this is also the day that Mercury comes into the exact conjunction with Venus. And this is really sweet. This is a really good day for us to speak sweetly, speak to our values and to our needs. This is a really cute moment if you're feeling creative, if you're wanting to lean into any, like, this is magic, this is beauty, this is balance, this is justice, this is flirting. This is just a really, really sweet energy. And again, Mercury, our voice, the messenger. This is also Mercury is our friendships. Mercury is our neighborhoods. Mercury is the connection to others, not romantically. That's Venus, but Venus is also here, right? So we can have sweet and romantic and playful and flirty conversations with our friends and our neighbors, or we can have really intelligent, intellectual, clear conversations with our loved ones and our partners on this day, remembering that Venus has just stationed retrograde. It's still at that 28-degree Leo retrograde station point. So Venus is digging in some things. So recognize the conversations and the connections that you're making around Thursday, because they can be important to this retrograde story that is happening for you. The other thing that happens today is after that conjunction, Mercury continues to move and it hits the exact quincunx to Pluto. So again, pulling in this yod that Venus has been holding steady for a week now, over that, longer than that. But this Mercury quincunx to Pluto, this can be the realization again that things might be deeper than what we thought. Or maybe you're not able to move through something as quickly or as easily. Maybe it's not as fixable as you thought, right? With these planets in fixed signs. Or maybe you're not over something that you thought you were over, right? There's something here that happens with Mercury and Pluto that allows us to see that these things are going deeper, right? Something might come up out into the open on this day. Be careful all week long with any kind of gossiping, as Mercury is so busy in the sky with a retrograde Venus and this quincunx energy. It's not comfortable. So be careful, who you're gossiping about and what you're saying. And, again, just recognizing where you're pushing things to fit, that maybe don't fit, or maybe they aren't ready to fit yet. So that can be available on Jupiter's day. We're also feeling that on Friday. As Mercury finishes up its time in Leo, it will hit that fire trine to the North Node at 29 degrees. And it will also, it's coming straight off of that. Oh, right. Jupiter day. Thursday is also the day that Pluto moves off of the 29th degree and into the 28th degree. And so when Pluto, a planet that moves so slowly and has been so activated, moves into another degree, it's kind of like, I think of Pluto moving degrees as like if you're suspended on an elevator that's broken and every time it like the rope gives or whatever, and you're like, like, I don't know, is that coming across? Do you know what I'm saying? But anyway, it's like this big like tilt like down to, Pluto, like Pluto energy. So on the 27th, it's already being activated by that Mercury But moving on to the 28th degree can be an additional jolt for Plutonian energy on this day, Jupiter's day, and then into Venus's day. Okay, so here we are on the 28th. This is Friday, Venus's day. And on this day, Mercury is at that 29th degree, now coming into a trine to the north node and a sextile to the south node. This happens early in the AM. By this time, by 9:30 a.m. on Friday, it's already moving past that degree. But it hits that trine to the north node after that conversation with Venus. So we get these sweet messages from Venus. Then we get this kind of like uncomfortable awareness from Pluto. And then it hits into the nodal axis, allowing us to kind of reshift into our, new alignment in whatever way before it dips into its home sign of Virgo. It moves into Virgo at 5:31 p.m. Eastern time on Venus's day, the 28th. And when Mercury moves into Virgo, it's this kind of like sobering quality. It's earthy, it's mutable, but it's also pinpoint focus. It's critical, it's discerning, it likes to analyze and get data. And so if we've been kind of swirling in our mind with all of these ideas, when Mercury drops into Virgo and starts to catch up with Mars, we really can get focused and get clear on how we're moving through something or get a plan. It focuses on, our mental processes and also on healing, on health in general, can all kind of be more on the top of our minds as Mercury is in Virgo. The moon is moving through Sagittarius on this day, on Friday, and it's going to square Saturn and Mars, bringing back up that Saturn-Mars stuff, right? So as the moon moves through Sagittarius, it allows us to kind of see the long-term goal that Saturn's making us build towards. But it's a fire sign and Sagittarius wants to go, right? Similar to Mars. So it's on this day, it's good for us to get the view, get the image. But if you try to rush to it, Saturn might halt, put the brakes on there as well. So being aware of the different Sagittarius themes and energies and how to work through those with this Saturn-Mars opposition, right? Remembering that Mars has the better position at this point in the opposite, Saturn, did I say Saturn? Saturn has the best position in this opposition. So we want to make sure to lean into the Saturnian qualities of going slower, of mastering something, of being mature, of recognizing where our responsibilities are and our boundaries and all that serious, blah, 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 Saturn stuff. Because once we, if we do that get up and go that Sagittarius and Mars, that fiery energy wants to do, Saturn might, throw us a reality check or a bumper in some way. So on Venus's day, there might be that feeling of like, oh, I want to do it. I want to go. I want to, do all this stuff, and just make sure that you're checking in with your own boundaries is what I would invite on that day. And then this is the third time at now 28 degrees that Pluto and the nodes hit that square. So again, we've been feeling it consistently, but this is just that third activation. And then after this point, the nodal axis is going to start moving faster and it'll move away from Pluto, because Pluto is slowing down to station at 27 degrees. But the nodal axis will continue to move backwards in the sky, and it'll get away from Pluto a little bit. This is the first one of the three exact hits that is at 28 degrees, but it's at 28 degrees and 58 minutes. So it's still very much 29 degrees. Most people would round up at that point to 29. Most astrologers would round up to 29 degrees anyway, but technically it is at the 28th degree now. Again, this is deep and powerful transformation. This is very dynamic changes that we are being forced to process. This is the continual back and forth and the that back and forth that we're feeling, it's like it gets real big, and then, it's hard to lean into changes, especially if they're not changes that we are making, if they're changes that we have to make. And so what's happening is there's continuing to be these different flare-ups, because as human beings, we tend to say, okay, yeah, like this has to change. Like when we're in the heat of the moment, we're like, this has to change. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do this anymore, whatever it is, right? And then it kind of slacks off, and so do we. And we're like, okay, well, we'll just settle back into what we know. We'll settle back into the old patterns, and then it flares up again. You're like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so it's this back and forth that allows us to eventually integrate that change. And so that's what we're feeling a lot of, throughout this month, but specifically with this back and forth with the nodes and Pluto. It's this feeling that we have to deal with it. Like we're being forced to deal with this. Like we have to deal with this change. And there's a spectrum of ways that can feel. But a lot of times it's not great. So, just honoring that dealing with some of this energy is painful and it's scary. And a lot of it is unknown. Because Pluto and the nodes are both things that we can't see. Like I can't look up in the sky and see Pluto. I can with a telescope, but I can't look up in the sky and see the nodes at all, even with a telescope, because they're not up there, right? It's here. And so there's a lot of difficulty that we find as humans to believe in something that we can't see, right? And so to make changes and to go somewhere where we don't see where maybe it's taking us or something, that can be terrifying. And so a lot of people are dealing with that energy as these, as this T-square between the nodes and Pluto is happening. But at the end of the day, we recognize that we have to accept these changes or these new ideas, these new awarenesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's Venus's day. And then we move on to Saturn's day on the 29th. And we have the moon finishes up its time in Sag today. And then it moves into Capricorn later in the evening. But on this day, we have yet another quincunx. Yay for more uncomfortability. We have the sun in a quincunx to Saturn. The sun is our identity, our will, our life force. It's in its home sign of Leo. And it's in an uncomfortable conversation with Saturn, the systems, the structures, the authority, bullies. This happens early in the AM, but we'll feel it for most of the day. This is just a feeling of being like it's not at ease. Like we're not free flowing here. There's a little bit of disjointed energy. Maybe it's hard to get into our body in that day. Maybe we're feeling a little bit triggered by the systems or the people that are in charge. And, this is, when the sun is in a quincunx to Saturn, it's like we're trying to shine our light, right? The sun is at home in Leo. It's confident, it's bold, it's shining our light. And Saturn in a quincunx is like coming in from the side and like cutting you off, like from shining your light. And that can be uncomfortable, frustrating, debilitating, exhausting, embarrassing, anxiety ridden, right? There's a lot of things that can come up when we have this sun quincunx to Saturn. So it's a pretty uncomfortable kind of transit. But as is life. And then we have Sunday. And remember, quincunxes, they're not out in the open uncomfortable. Like this is a kind of like internal uncomfortability. So if you're feeling internally kind of like, if you're doubting yourself a little bit, if you're having a little bit of self-confidence stuff, breathe. It'd be good to get out into the sun. The sun is at home, right? So it can help us be rejuvenated. What we don't want to do is isolate ourselves. That's a Saturnian thing to do, is to isolate yourself. So you don't want to do that on Saturn's day when it's in a quincunx to the sun. We want to give the support to the sun, to our life force, to our consciousness, right? So if you can get out into the sun and let yourself kind of be healed by the vitamin D a little bit, and remember not to isolate yourself, don't bully yourself, right? Like all of those things can be very present with a sun quincunx to Saturn. Okay, now we'll move into the sun's day. This is July the 30th. And on this day, we have the moon now into Capricorn, into early Capricorn. And we also have the second exact quincunx between Venus, now retrograde, quincunx Neptune. This is happening at 27 degrees of Leo and Pisces. But it's been an orb, this has been pulling. This is just another exact kind of peak moment. And this can, again, uncomfortability or dis-ease of the Venus Neptune stuff, right? So idealizing, romanticizing, fantasy versus reality, romance and creativity, and all of these places where maybe we're feeling a little bit uncomfortable spiritually. Something is just off, or we're trying to make something, force something to fit here, that just doesn't fit exactly the way that it is supposed to. This can also be addictions, be related to addictions or escaping reality, using spirituality to bypass the real experience. All of these things can be at play under a Venus quincunx to Neptune. But like I said, it's been an orb for a while, and the first time that did this quincunx was on the 15th of July. So the 15th of July, and then the second time, July 30th. So maybe if there's something that links you back, if you want to trace that. But again, a quincunx is under the surface uncomfortability, so it might not be anything right that you're feeling directly. Again, this is happening at 27 degrees. So depending on what points and places you have in the chart that would be aspected by that. I do love later on this day, on the sun's day, we have the moon that will be moving through Capricorn, and later in the day, it forms a grand Earth trine in the sky, and I love it. So I have a lot of Earth energy, so I am prone to enjoying Earth grand trines. If you are someone that likes to go fast, then you probably don't feel the same way that I do about Earth trines, because they are slow, they are grounding, they are slow and grounding, and I love it. This can be supportive of any work around our resources. This can be, it's grounding, it's resourceful, but it's slow. So if you're trying to do something fast at this time, that might be annoying, because this energy is very slow. But again, as it moves through later in the day, it's going to hit into Mars and Jupiter at 12 and 13 degrees of Earth signs. And again, just super grounding, super present, if you're needing to be with someone and like be present with someone, great energy to do that. If you're wanting to plant something, great energy to be in the garden, doing any of that work, being outside, taking a hike, just being in nature. really good for work with resources. If you want to do any kind of spell work, it's really good for all of that as well, because Jupiter is opportunities and abundance, and Mars is going to make it happen, and it's in Virgo. So it can be focused and clear and precise with the actions and what, where the energy is being focused. So I love it. I love it. Sunday afternoon, evening, I really, really enjoy this little grand Earth trine. So take it or leave it, but that's my juicy little moon nugget. And then we get into Moon Day and the last day of July, July 31st, and the moon is still in Capricorn. By late evening, it will dip into Aquarius, but not before it hits into a conjunction with Pluto, squares the nodes, and reactivates all of that fun stuff. So late PM, it moves into Aquarius, and it starts to build to the full moon that happens on the following day, which will be the next Mars day that we chat about, will be the Aquarius full moon. The other thing that happens on this day is Mars reaches that 13-degree point and comes into that exact trine with Jupiter that the moon kind of activated the evening before. This is all building us to the full moon, but this is really sweet for, again, like grounding, any kind of that like spell manifestation work. We're coming into the full moon. It's a really good time to manifest. And with this earth energy and the clarity of Mercury and Mars in Virgo, I really like it to do some of that resource spell work. But this is also really good for our confidence. This is good for our determination. And this is good for our hope. Jupiter is opportunities and hope, and it's coming into a conversation with Mars, which is decently placed. It's not really having any hard aspects now that it's past that opposition to Saturn. And so I really like this for kind of like a boost at the end of the month to get us into August and get us into that, that following week. We have the Aquarius full moon. We also have Mercury coming into that opposition with Saturn next week. But on Sunday evening into Monday, I really like that earthy support that we have going on with Jupiter, allowing us to see a little bit of hope in the seeds that we're planting, right? In the work that we're doing, that long trotting that Jupiter's doing with Uranus in Taurus, right? That like deep kind of sustainable seeds that are being planted. So, my friends, that is the astrology of the week. Okay, so I'm going to pause because that was a lot, I know. As always, I will have chapters for you to go through and come back to specific days as we move through them. I'm going to pause for a moment, and then we will do the tarot for the week ahead, but feel free to ask any questions here live or in the comments of anything that came up for you, anything that you would like to share. And then we will be using the Light Seers Tarot deck this week because it's the one that I have here. Okay, BRB. Okay, so I'm going to start by just doing a quick smoke cleanse. Oh, I forgot to mention, I harvested my first mimosa tree for the bark, and I used the leaves, and I'm so excited. I used some of the rainwater that I collected under the Cancer new moon and the mimosa leaves to do a ritual bath yesterday. It was phenomenal. And we have like so many. So I don't know if y'all know a lot about mimosas, but they are they're an invasive species. So they grow like everywhere. And including in the yard that I'm staying in. And they're good for like everything that I need assistance with. So it seemed very aligned for me to be in a space that has that medicine available. And so I was finally able to utilize it, and oh, it was lovely. I'm planning on posting more about it for y'all on my Instagram stories, but I'm big fan so far of the mimosa healing tree. Um, and also big news. Big news. Okay, big news. I can finally announce it because it's been all finalized, the paperwork, the financials, all of it. I am taking a death doula training course with a death doula that I have been following for years and has just shifted. It's Alua Arthur. I don't know if you know Alua Arthur, but look her up. It is Going with Grace, and I am beyond. Like, this was, for me, this is part of the Saturn Mars opposition stuff that happened for me last week. This is like stretch goal. Like, I can't, it was a dream. Like, I never thought that listen, I never thought that I would be able to take this course, this training, and to have it financially sponsored. And I can't, I am beyond grateful, like, for all of you, like, and just, oh, like, it's just, I can't. So yeah, I am just beyond grateful. So that's my big news. I haven't announced it publicly. I don't know if I will or when I will. But I wanted to share with my friends. So thanks for being here. Yeah, that is so cool. Squealing, that is so exciting. You've been talking about wanting to do this for a long time. Yeah, and like all of the astrology and the tarot and the, one-on-one work that I do has all been building to my death doula work. Like, that's what I've been building towards. And I thought that I didn't know when it would get, like, when I would get to that point. Yeah, here we are. Very exciting. Okay, so thank you for sharing in that excitement with me. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's actually ground now. So grateful. Okay. So doing another quick smoke cleanse now that my energy has leaked. And we're just going to ask for some guidance for the week ahead, just a card for us to ground into, those that are here live and watching on the replay, gathering all of the timelines now. As always, I invite you to breathe or center if you choose. Just to allow your intuition to bring to you anything that is necessary in your journey as you look at the card. Recognizing that it doesn't have to do with anything that we've talked about here today or anything that I will post about later. Your intuition is a separate conversation. So we will pull the card here together. And then I'll post about it more later under Tarot with Mary on Patreon later this week. Just the support and some guidance for the week ahead. Noticing what comes up for you, what sticks out to you. What do you hear, smell, feel? The Queen of Cups in the chat. Oh, I love this. This is the good card for this week. I agree. Okay, Queen of Cups. So I will leave you with that. Please feel free to check in with me, share what you have moving through, whenever, wherever. I love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. I'm honored to be in space with you, and we will chat very soon.